to today. We have an esteemed group of panelists who are here with us. First of all, the co-founder and executive director of Black Voters Matter. Let me just say this: Black Voters Matter has done more democracy and educating, organizing, mobilizing past number of years. It has not been for the mobilization of Black Voters Matter and all the work that they have done. They also, one of their greatest assets is the Blackest Bus. I had white folks come get on the bus. I'm like, yeah, we come on the bus. But, they want everybody wants to be on the Blackest Bus in America. There's a famous story, God rest her soul, Sheila Jackson Lee. April will remember this. There were some buses at a rally, several buses, plus the Black Voters Matter bus. And some folks said, we're gonna take over this bus. She said, no, I'm not getting on that bus. Y'all take me to the Black Voters Matter bus. So let's give Cliff Albright a round of applause, the co-founder. Also here, the Director of Programs and Economic Innovation at the Selma Center for Non-Violence, Lydia Chapman. Give her a round of applause. The Alabama State Organizing Manager for Black Voters Matter is here, Deanna Reed. Give Deanna a round of applause. And the SGA President of Miles College, James Fields IV. HBCU. All right, Miles. So we want to talk about this topic: blood on the bridge, gun violence from Bloody Sunday to today, and also unnamed and unbound. Cliff will also tell us a bit about the Warren Clinic that is going on here in Selma. The Black Voters Matter has stood up. They're doing the on-the-ground work. Nobody here. There's a whole lot of folks who got Instagram accounts and think that's the only qualification to be a leader. Not even a servant, but a leader. And we cannot depend upon these social media that we do not control. They can turn them off tomorrow. Then where's your constituency? We learned just the other day, we know there were a lot of people who felt this down after the election and wanted to give up and were depressed and out of it. And some people said, we don't want to do anything. Well, a couple of people said that. But we learned the other day that when that went out there, Musk and Zuckerberg pushed it more and amplified it. Did you notice that? All everybody was saying, we don't want to march, we don't want to do anything anymore. And then it just expanded. They were pushing it. So there's social engineering going on social media. But Black Voters Matter is in the streets, on the streets. They out here dealing with people face to face, not just on social media, but right where everything is happening with boots on the ground. So let's hear first to kind of give us some context about what this building even means we're in. What happened here? This too is sacred ground. What happened here in this very Dallas County Courthouse, the historical significance of this space. Let's hear it from Cliff Albright. Give him a round of applause.
How y'all doing? If y'all don't mind, help me out for a second. When I say love, you say power. Love. Love. All right, I like the sound of that. All right, y'all. I wanted to start off with that because that's really what centers our work with Black Voters Matter, right? We're not just a voting organization. We don't just go out, register people to vote and turn out people to vote. We always talk about our mission is spreading love and building power. Rooted in Dr. King's analysis of how we needed both of those things, right? Because power without love is reckless and abusive. But love without power is sentimental and anemic. And so we need both of those things, and especially right here in Selma. Part of the reason why we wanted to have this discussion, we have a public conversation, Mark does it every year, but part of the reason why we want to be involved in this one was because we wanted to have a discussion that was rooted in what it is the folks in Selma wanted to talk about. For those of y'all who have been here before, some of y'all, this might be your first time in Selma, some of y'all, it might be multiple times. But a lot of the times, real talk, this is an important weekend. And we're glad that a lot of people come here from not just all over the country, but from all over the world. But a lot of times, the folks who live here are left out. They're left out of events, they're left out of discussions, or even if they're at the discussion, they're not at the center of the discussion. And so we wanted to do, not just this event, but a couple events. Mark mentioned the Warren Clinic. I'll talk about that just briefly in a second. But we wanted to have a conversation on a topic that was important to folks in Selma. And so what we heard from our friends and partners at the Selma Center, at some of the other organizations that we work with here, is we got to talk about this gun violence issue. It is killing our community, literally. And so we thought about it and said, okay, that's what folks want to talk about. We need to talk about it. And it's connected to this issue that has us here this weekend, this voting rights issue, this Bloody Sunday issue. Because if you know the history of Bloody Sunday, if you know the history of the Selma Montgomery March, if you know the history of organizing in Selma and the Black Belt, you can't talk about that history and not talk about gun violence, right? A lot of people say, well, you know, Bloody Sunday wasn't really bloody. Ain't nobody died on Bloody Sunday. But why was there even a march taking place? Because a young brother named Jenny Lee Jackson was what? Shot in Perry County. Beaten up, but also shot in Perry County. What about Byron Leonza? Shot driving people back and forth from Selma to Montgomery. What about Jonathan Daniels, civil rights organizer who stepped in to keep a young sister, Black organizer from being hurt? He got shot in Lowndes County. You can't talk about this movement and not talk about gun violence. And that also means that we can't fully understand what's happening in our communities today without talking about that history. Because part of what generates this violence that we see in our communities is some of the same hatred, some of the same devaluation of Black life, sometimes even by us, but it is rooted, it's not just, oh, you don't know how to parent your child. It's not just, oh, you just don't know how to act, and that's why we're killing each other. There are a variety of issues and reasons that create gun violence. This entire country saw an increase in gun violence during COVID. Why? You got people isolated from each other, going through all kinds of challenges, going through economic challenges. So we got to understand that there are roots of gun violence in our community. That doesn't mean that there's also some discussions we have to have about just basically how we treat each other, and maybe even most importantly, just about the availability of guns in our community to begin with. So there's a lot of things that we got to talk about. So this is a challenging discussion. We got an incredible panel here, and we're eager to take some questions a little bit later on. It's a hard discussion, y'all, and we only have an hour to do it. And there's a lot of different angles that we got to touch. But I just wanted to take a second just to give a little bit of that background and that context so we can try to help frame this discussion and better understand what it is that's happening in our community structure. Just a quick round of applause.
Now, so some of the decisions made in this building still themselves impact public safety. Amen. So that's what we're here to talk about. So we want to go now to our panelists. I want to raise a few questions here. Just kind of have everyone respond. How do county level decisions affect public safety? Number one, and you all can just take all of these together. What is the current state of community safety in Dallas County? And what role do elected officials play in shaping safety policy? So county level decisions, how they affect public safety, the role of elected officials, how they affect public safety, and what is the current state? Maybe we should start there. What is the current state of community safety itself in Dallas County? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all for the opportunity to share, this evening. And so when it comes to the question of how, my question is, how are the children? That is a question that we have to ask ourselves, and our children are not well. They are not safe. They are intimidated by what they see. We have children in our schools who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because they have literally, as a part of their lifestyle, learned how to just drop to the floor out of their bed. And for an elementary school child, for a middle school child, for a high school child, imagine carrying that load, walking into the school and trying to what your math teacher is talking about. They've lost relatives, very close relatives. So the current state of violence in our community, we are in an emergency. We are experiencing a dire epidemic where hands are needed on deck. Not just our elected officials, we can no longer stand back and point at people and say that, wait a minute, it's the policies. We also have to consider the choices that we're making. I grew up in Ward 6, so if you all are familiar with Selma, it was one of the hardest hit areas when we had a tornado in 2023. The neighborhood is continuing to struggle to get back on its feet. I remember my grandparents being able to bring other folks into the home, like not having to lock your door. I'm aging myself, a lot older than I look, I hope. And that being said, there was a community, there was an interdependence not too long ago that helped many of our young people, our families, to be safe, to feel loved. That's not in place anymore. So it's not about just our elected officials and the policies that are in place. We've got to get back to the basics of loving on one another. And when, if we choose not to do that, we will continue to take the losses that we see in our community. And Selma, Dallas County, we are not unlike many communities across this country. And so we invite people in. Don't call people out, we invite people in at the Selma Center for Nonviolence. And so we are excited to have the conversations. We're excited to challenge people to have the tough conversations, speaking the truth in love and holding people accountable in love. And making sure we're moving forward. And we want to go together.
Thank you for that. Lisa, of course, you know, mobile because of this, and we've essentially seen the residue of this violence that we're witnessing, which is rooted in white supremacy and racism, which has now impacted the way a lot of times we see ourselves. And so, as she if you're in a neighborhood when it rains on one block, it just doesn't hit one house; it hits all of us. And so in Birmingham, my story is that my dad left the house, headed to the store, and he home because he was murdered by someone who was in his mid-20s. And so even as we were going through that trial and the case was happening and the testimonies were going forth and the young man was telling his story, he essentially said that it was never supposed to happen this way. I was just trying to put food on the table because it happened during an attempted robbery, right? And so that is why we can't talk about gun violence and public safety and not talk about issues like poverty, right? And not talk about issues like environmental justice and not talk about issues like healthcare and not talk about the fact that Alabama is investing a crazy amount of resources in building prisons and not investing directly into our school system, right? So we got to talk about education and the deficiencies, right, and the lack of resources that are being put into schools, that are being put into mental health resources, that are being put into programs that really help empower and help folks deal with a lot of this trauma and a lot of what they've experienced, right? And so I think that a lot of those conversations have to happen in community. And so you asked about the role our elected officials play. We know that they get a chance to determine how those resources are spent, right? Like, how are we allocating our budget? And we know that as community members, we now get a chance to hold those folks accountable, which is why we have to show up. We have to show up to every city council meeting. We have to show up for every single election so that we can tell folks and that we can show them, just like we hired you, we will also fire you, right? And can I get, look, don't let me have church by myself. And so I appreciate Lydia providing that background. We're seeing how this isn't just an issue that is native about that young man. He had, right? He had not just perpetrated that impacted, but also a son and a daughter that has to grow up. So definitely thinking about all the ways that gun violence is impacting not just those who are on the side of the situation itself, but those who are also involved in those acts.
All right, thank you.
Well, I just want to start off by thank you all so much for having me here. As the HCA president and just seeing how many students we have on our campus at Mount, especially in HCU, and just seeing how many, so many students are affected by gun violence, it's really hurting. Even this year at Mount College, we had to reschedule our homecoming due to gun violence in that area. We had to reschedule the whole plan. As an HCA president, I had to literally do the whole thing last minute because of gun violence and the mass shooting that happened in Birmingham. So it's really important for us to talk about our experience and also talk about how it's affecting all of us. See, sometimes fellas, this is not knocking on our door, but it's always knocking on our door because when it affects one of us, it affects all of us. And just seeing how we went from Bloody Sunday to now, boots on the ground. We have to put our boots on the ground. We have to mobilize. We have to come together. We have to strategize because it's affecting all of us. We have to stay strong. And also talking about children experience. It's really important that we talk about children because seeing how a child can go from a child to an adult and seeing how those things can affect them. What are we doing to get mental programs to help children from when they're at a young age so that when they do grow up, that they can be get the jobs that we claim they have, black jobs that they claim they have, that they can then become the next teachers, the next doctors. Sometimes so much trauma is holding our students back from their greatest achievement. So we have to continue to encourage them. We have to continue to give them strength. One thing that we're doing, especially at HBCUs in Alabama, is providing services for students. But it's not, we just can't stop there. We have to make sure that we continue this thing, whether it's for jobs and continue this legacy, because you don't want a student to feel alone. Suicide is very high in Alabama. It's also high in the nation. So just seeing how gun violence is affecting all of us, we really want to make change, whether it's through connecting with local programs like Black Voters Matters or even politicians, we have to make a change.
All right, all right. First of all, let's just acknowledge the wisdom in this young panel. Isn't it good to see young people up here talking? We always have panels of older people, but then it's good to see young people. And by young people, I'm including Cliff and me. No, really, you all are great. And this is it. The folk here in Selma, Dr. King was 25, right?
Yeah.
When he lived? 26? So, you know, that's what we do. All right. All right, so we want to move on. We talked about, you know, the local impact, and these are stirring stories. And I'm glad we're streaming this. All of our broadcasts this weekend are courtesy of the AFL-CIO. We're thankful for them. because people around the country need to hear this. Sometimes people, I'm very about to say, a lot of times people only think of in the big cities, so to speak. Like I live in New York and DC and places like that. They just ignore and write off, well, that's not really real down there. So I'm glad you all said that and people can see and hear that. And so solutions, what are we gonna do about this? Can we talk now about what are some of the local organizing efforts that you all involved in? Coalition building, violence, relationship. Okay. We got that's everybody else. This is the first one I want to bring back. Let's, I mean, either
Immediate in electing people who have fruit. One of the things that I think that we have to do, definitely as Black folks in a majority Black city, is have a when we have really become so the systems, and systems are designed to do exactly what they're trying to do, what they are being very successful at eliminating Black history, at connecting men from the household, at wrecking and be a part of our public education system. And so for Black folks, we gotta, have the wherewithal to want to get off the planet. Understand that there's no longer a fence, there's not an electric or anything. We can't actually make decisions that can cause us to live freedom. We've got freedom. And when we want freedom, we start to make different decisions. We start to elect people, this is a touchy subject, elected officials in our community. We start to elect people who actually, as I said earlier, have fruit. And what I mean by that is a reference, I'm a Christian, and even though I work for a nonprofit, and so and so before we decide to elect people, we have to see and look, what was your fruit before I vote? What have you produced in the community before you very nice, slick, full color? Like, I appreciate great graphic design. I promise you, I love it. But what have you done? Don't run me the resume about who you are and who you were in college. Like, what have I seen you do? And I don't mean seeing you do on social media, because you take a picture every time you give a homeless person a bottle of water. What impact are you actually making before you decide to write your name down and submit whatever fee is necessary to be on that ballot? We've got to make sure that as the people who are electing folks, that are considering these things, that we're not voting for people because we recognize that we're right? So we got this is my cousin, this is my friend. What has your friend done to build the community forward without having the when we don't see that, we have to pause and start to ask them questions. And then we have to hold them accountable. As we said, you know, we can't just keep electing and let them in office. That is absolutely a mistake. That is a part of the system that is working. We can't keep supporting a particular party because it feels comfortable and this is where we're supposed to be. So we're supposed to be free. So if your party is not causing people to be free, Selma Center, we host state. Usually we're hosting them once a quarter. That's not enough. Once a month, in between, following a model of communities who are getting it right. Omaha, Nebraska is an extraordinary program that has folks from all public service, nonprofit organizations coming together, meeting on a weekly basis to use data to inform their decisions. Not be afraid to use the real number, where our baseline is, and then we've got to use strategy. If we want, we've got to use those numbers to make sure that we are making sure that our families are safe.
Well, let me first say amen. And I was trying to take all the notes. She made a really valid point, and I, of course, shared the story about my father, but what I didn't share is that he was a pastor, and so I am definitely, he came through and through, and you know, in church culture, we love a good alliteration. And so as my sister Lydia was talking, I wrote down information. Y'all say information. I wrote down investment, say investment, and I wrote down inspiration, say inspiration. And that is basically get a chance to do 365 days of the calendar year at BBM. And I love how after every single call, the black on matter, 365 days, we won't let down, you black up. And so the reason why that is because this person has to be connected. Now, we can't just show up with a fish plate and some chicken wings, right? Like, we have to and not transactional. Come on now. And so what that means is we are showing information, right, on how your vote influences all of the things that we're talking about today, including gun violence, including public safety. And so even before I got to BBM, I was a candidate work clearly. I'm so glad that Jesus set me free. The reason why I'm glad that I've been set free, April, is because I get a chance not to be candidate focused, but cause driven. And that is part of the power at BBM because we can talk to folks directly about their issues. So that means if your candidate does not win, you don't feel like you lost too, right? Because we understand in the capacity building organization, meaning that we get a chance to directly invest in organizations that are oftentimes overlooked, forgotten about, left out of the conversation. But again, y'all real churchy. My dad talk about the least of these, right? And we don't see them as least because we know why. Black voters matter. Black people matter. Black programs matter. And we prove it time after time. If you invest in black people, we gonna win every time. Nothing else took a lot. Come on now. And so just that investment piece, and thank God for our leadership. April is in the back and Latasha is in Montgomery, but just being mindful that they're making some and doing incredible work. They're members. And so as we're thinking about this strategy, we can't do it in a way. Right? Like we could have this conversation and not have students from Selma high school here. Right? What last weekend where 6 teenagers were right? And so these are their peers. So it's not, oh my God, it's not enough for us to when folks just have all of the time. I'm gonna stop is just the inspiration portion. I'm glad that Quill kind of laid the foundation talking about power and love because this work truly is centered in black love and black joy, right? We get a chance to be, April said on one call that we are freedom evangelists, right? In black church culture, we talk about being glory carriers, right? So everywhere that we go, like we should be able to spread that hope, to spread that joy, to bring that light. And so last thing, because again I'm sure, so moving this microwave, is that Nipsey Hussle talks about if okay, and I'm probably gonna remix it a little bit, but he talks about that if you're saying you're for black people, but you're afraid of black people, you're really not for black people. And I'm saying that to say that you have so many people sometimes that are like, we gonna go here, but I ain't going over there. I'm gonna let them do that work over there. I'm gonna let that group go to the brickyard. I'm gonna let that group. But what I'm saying is, we gotta go wherever the need is, and so that's what BBM gets a chance to do. And we hope and pray that you all will leave this room again thinking differently about your information, right? Being consistent in your messaging, talking to folks 365 days out of the year, your investment that's time, talent, treasure, right? So maybe you can't write a $5,000 check, but you can volunteer 5 hours with an organization. And then the inspiration, right? Like how are you showing up in communities that folks have counted out? They counted us out. They counted those out that were walking across the bridge. But we know we say it all the time, those that counted us out couldn't count, right? Because we're still here and we have to take the new and the old in order to reimagine, as one of our co-founders would say, what this work has to look like.
Doors of the church are open.
It's really hard to follow those two amazing women. But going into what they said, we have to then ask ourselves, what does changing the strategy look like? How will we change the strategy? A lot of times we keep talking about things, but what are our actions after these? What are our solutions? We have to find ways, and to me, I think our solution is making sure that we're electing people who are going to those high schools, checking on those students when things like that happen, because you never know how they're affected by that. Going to those colleges and seeing how can we get more students to vote. One of the things that I did at my institution was my first semester as a sophomore, arranged for 75 students to vote on Friday and Wednesday. Yeah, connect with the students, but also like not just forcing it in their face, like giving them things like where there's candy or really trying to see like why they don't vote. A lot of times they don't vote because they don't know what to vote for, or they don't know why to vote. But we have to understand, we have to then tell them the stories of Bloody Sunday, how our ancestors, and some of them are even still alive, how they marched, how they were beaten, how they were told, just for us to get the right to vote, just for us to get the right to come to the courtroom. It's really inspiring me to be on the panel with all these amazing leaders, because in this exact courtroom, over 60 years ago, black people had to come through the back doors. We had people who were struggling in this exact courtroom to register to vote. We had white people, and this is why it's based on racism, who would put signs up saying that they were on lunch break, even though they were not, and sit down in front of those black people and tell them that they did not want them to register to vote. So we have to then tell those stories to the younger generation, to the students that still behind. We have to then tell them, this happened in your exact city, this happened in your exact state. How can we get you to vote? How can we get you to mobilize? We also have to get our politicians to tell them to level up. We have to get them to move. We have to get them to show action. I had the opportunity to work at the Alabama House, and although there are far more Republicans than Democrats, we still can get them to all strategize for the rights of the people in the state of Alabama. Whether it's doing notes and letterheads and sending them to the governor, things of that nature. We have to do just small things, whether it's going out in the community and say, hey, this is what's happening. Although we hate social media has become the biggest platform. We can then spread word of things that is happening. Like just last week, they were passing things that were not beneficial when it comes to juveniles in the state of Alabama. Things that are most beneficial to juveniles and marginalized community. So what are we doing to make sure that they are fighting for us, speaking on our behalf?
So I really don't have much to add on to what they said. But since you asked the part about what's the connection between voting rights, right? If you look at the states that have some of the worst voter suppression, what do you also see? They have some of the worst gun violence. They got some of the worst health care. They got some of the worst education, right? And so one of the things I often say is you can't have a people's agenda if you don't have a government that reflects the people. And so when you have voter suppression, what you are fundamentally creating is a situation where you got people in power at all levels, right? But particularly at state, where you got people in power that don't care about our communities. And so we can't get past like some common sense gun, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of issues that we need to talk about that's related to the gun violence. But guess what? They got poverty in the United Kingdom, but they ain't got no gun violence. They got mental health issues in Canada, but they ain't got no gun violence, right? And so we got to deal with all those issues, but we got to fundamentally deal with this issue of the availability of guns in our communities. And that requires us to be able to put people in office that are going to care about our community. The last thing I'll say is this, and this isn't so much on the voting rights issue, but you also asked about like examples of places where it's working. And I'm glad you shared that Omaha example. There's also, some of y'all may know about this brother, Michael Tubbs, who was mayor of, what is it Stockton? I think it's Stockton, California, right? And Michael Tubbs, got a lot of attention some years ago because one of the things he did in Stockton was he did a guaranteed income program, right? Where they were literally giving out guaranteed like stipends to families so that they could have a guaranteed income to meet some basic needs. Well, a lot of things happened as a result of that program, right? Educational outcomes improved, health outcomes improved, but guess what? Gun violence went down. Because crazy as it is, when folks have their basic needs met, they not shooting folk as much. And so there's a lot of elements to this that we gotta deal with. Some of it is the economic, but again, I'm gonna come back to, we gotta have people in office at all levels, local, state, and federal, that will pass some common sense stuff that can get these guns off our streets. We still gotta deal with ourselves and community and value and life and all of that, but we gotta have some folks that fundamentally care about our communities. In a lot of our states across this country, and even in a lot of our cities, we simply don't have that right now. And that's by design, that ain't that.
We're gonna do some, so everybody has cards, if you wanna write your question down, and then Lisa said we're gonna come to questions. I owe you an apology, because, your other half wanted to say something, and I didn't say it when you started talking. So it's my fault, I didn't let you go first. This is April Albright, Cliff off, one of the co-founders of Black Voters Matter. Give her a round of applause too.
We uniquely have in the room right now the district attorney for this judicial session, right? Who is faced with, what do you do in your community when you have so many young folks? Because what we're not talking about is how young the folks who are committing the violence in our communities are, right? And so the typical response from our community, right, is what? We want more police, right? We want more police, we want more law enforcement, and we want more prosecution. And as if that's the way that we deal with this issue in our community. And so I would love for the panel to kind of unpack that, because we've got to talk about not just the fact that it's happening, right? And the examples that you gave were awesome in terms of some strategies that we're trying to do to preempt it from happening. But when it happens, what do we do? Do we continue to, at the same time, criticize America's criminal justice system, right? But at the same time, asking folks like, Robert Turner, who is the DA, and he's a progressive DA, which is why he won. But progressive DAs, right, are no longer sexy. They have literally been recalled in many cities because they were against things like over prosecution, overzealousness. So I don't know if people like to participate in the conversation, but I do want the panel to talk about that. Do we continue to just turn our eye and just beg the criminal justice system to take care of our problems? Right? When our communities are begging for that assistance in our community, even though we know sometimes it also leads to harm.
Anybody want to find that? Or does the DA want to say anything? There's a mic right there. Come on, doctor.
Give me a shot on them.
I don't know what this is.
If that work, try to say something and see if it works. Or if you want, come on up here. Come on up here. You DA. I'm not supposed to be up here, you're supposed to be.
My wife is texting me probably 30 times. Like, babe, where you at? Where you at, man? Put it on there. Ended up being volunteered into the mock trial. And from the mock trial, this spilled over. And one of the things that I think a lot of elected officials would like the general public to know is that the public needs to know the job of the particular individual and all of the challenges that individual faces with the job. So one of the things that I have vowed to do, because y'all already know, those of you who have been here all day, I'm a big talker too. But my challenge in 2025 has been, listen, we got some great talkers from DC all the way down to DC, Dallas County. But we don't have as many good listeners. And so there was a part of me, because you don't become an elected official without having a little bit of ego, confidence, and arrogance. But there was a part of me that says, how can we have a discussion in Selma about violent crime and the DA who is here and is the only elected official that is here And he ain't even on the panel. Selma this weekend celebrates 60 years of the march. And all of these people are gonna come and take pictures and walk across our bridge and not know that in a city of 16,752 people, we have had in Selma. Y'all ready for this? 4 plus 10 is what? 14. 14 plus 26 is 40. 40 homicides in a city with that population over the last 3 years. 26 in 23, 10 in 24, and we already have had 4 homicides. I ain't talking about shootings. Conversely, Hoover, Alabama, for those of y'all much about Hoover, 93,000 people population. They've only had 4 homicides in that same time frame. So my constituents said, Turner, what you gonna do about the gambling? They got gambling houses. Y'all need to go bust them. They gambling over there. Turner, what you gonna do about the fact that you got all these people that might be voting absentee? Y'all need to do something about these voting absentees. In my office, I'm worried about what do you tell a mother. I've been in office 2 years. I'm talking to mothers whose kids were murdered 7 years ago, and there has not been a trial. And every time you look around, there's people talking about what the politicians ain't doing. This is a multi-level issue that has to be dealt with on multiple levels. A month ago, I penned an article that says, don't until it affects you. Until it affects you. If you want to be real, I wish that DAs didn't have to wear suits. I didn't wear one today. But we almost need to be wearing fatigues in some of these inner cities and some of these areas because people don't really want to know the truth. I'm going to get some heat for this one, but I'm going to put it out there. What did I mean by don't wait until it affects you, until it affects you? When drive-bys start hitting the suburb, when Hoover High School has a football game at homecoming, and the shoe breaks out in the parking lot, and don't nobody want to talk about who did it. Oh, now we want to have a conversation about gun control. My thing is, why can't I drive down Broad Street right now and not put insurance on my car because I don't want to? The law says I have to have insurance on my car. But anytime a district attorney or a police officer says we need stricter gun laws, get a license, take a test, show some training. It's our constitutional right. Driving is a privilege. But the Constitution gives us the right to bear arms. Let's start having some real conversations. The issues here is that it's too many of us. The crime is a lot of times black on black, but it's not about being black on black because most white crime is white on white. If you don't believe it, you let a brother kill somebody that don't look like him and see how it makes national news. So what we really have to do is let's have conversations. Your politicians are people like you. The real truth of the matter is, and that's why we see in Donald Trump and Musk, it's not profitable to be a politician. You make way more money in the private sector than you do as an elected official. But so many of us, even some of us that are and are here in town this week, I'm not criticizing you, but I'm just telling you like it is. I came from private practice. I made way more money in my daddy law firm than I make as a district attorney. But I had to do something. Too many of us who can do, won't do. But we like to elect people that we can tell them what to do. And until we get more people who realize I have made enough money, now I'm going to get on the city council. Because guess what? In Selma, the DA can't control who the police chief is. The DA has no control over who the investigators of a homicide case are. We gotta work with whoever made the case. And you gotta vote from the ground all the way up and understand that you can't point the blame at one or two people when you choose not to be a police. In the black community, let's be real, a DA is a sellout. A police officer is a sellout. How you gonna lock up your own people? Well, I'm gonna turn around and ask you, well, how your own people gonna kill your own people? And while you worried about free Bobo, the prosecutor gotta talk to the person who Bobo killed, whose son ain't never coming back. So we've got to work together now, and I apologize, I know I went too long, but I couldn't leave, because sometimes if you're not in the room, you don't know how people really feel about your position. So I really was hoping to just sit there and hear what people were going to say about the position and tell us how to do our job better. Because as leaders, we do have to listen. Because we operate in silos sometimes. Not because we want to, but it's because when you are elected, the first thing people say is that you changed. But a lot of times what happens is that y'all change around us. Black folk, and I know we got multiculturals in here, but I can speak on, I'm from Maryland where Jenna Jackson really was shot. My uncle was the one who came up with the strategy, let's take Jenna Lee's body to Montgomery and put it on the governor's steps and cooler heads prevail. I'm one of the folk who feel like this. If we're really gonna make some change and start dealing with how we're gonna get to the bottom of the root of all of this stuff, we are going to have to understand that our community has to stop saying, we put them in office, now let's see what they're gonna do. We are the only people that after we elect you, instead of saying, let's support them and encourage them and tell them what we need them to do, we say, let's put him in office and let's see what he's gonna do. What they're saying in Dallas County, we already had 2 or 3 black males, it's time for as if every black person is the same person. We have to move from there, and we have to talk, we have to listen. And I was listening to all of that, and the stories are much what you've even heard. But we have to really come together. Some of you guys, go back and run for office. Go back and organize or work with candidates. Go into these schools, stop moving. I thought she was gonna get that when she talked about the bikes. See, I'm a civil rights family. The prayers on the bridge was so that one day we would be able to walk down and have black elected officials. God looked at our ancestors and says, is that what y'all, do y'all really want that? So God said, yes. And as soon as he said, so it is, we moved to Belgrade, Prattville, Montgomery, Pike Road, Georgia. God gave us Selma, and Selma wasn't good enough for us. With the right vision, Selma can come back up because God gave it to him. It just didn't look like, he don't give you something that he don't want you to work to keep. And so what we gotta do now is understand that some of the best and brightest minds leave, and they come back every March. And expect it to be different. And you ain't do nothing to make it better after you marched. And say it looked the same way this year as it did last year. Because the marchers are not continuing to march after we cross the bridge. I apologize. And we thank you all for this panel. We thank you for your passion, your attention. But go back to wherever you are and realize that the fight requires you. The education you receive, the knowledge, the spirituality that you've absorbed, these kids need to know that you love them And the grown folks need to know that we love them. And we've got to make it so that we are all working together. Don't just put people in office and say, we voted for them and they ain't did nothing. Because sometimes the people that you vote for, they want to hear you say, I know you made a sacrifice. And we support you. Keep your head up. Every now and then. Not just what are you doing. I'm gonna leave on this clip. This is that time. I get a phone call on my cell phone yesterday. There is a young man who has a pending murder case. The victim is my first cousin's daughter, who was a waitress in the restaurant that we owned in Marion. His father called the suspect and says, the man who killed my son get out on bond yesterday. Y'all missed it. His son killed my cousin and is out on bond. His other son was murdered by someone else. Y'all with me?
Yeah.
He doesn't think that the person who killed his son should be out on bond. But you talking to the DA who your other son killed, who objected your son being out on bond, and you feel like there's an injustice. That's the kind of stuff that's going on the street. It doesn't affect you until it affects you. And we got to stop that. Because what affects one affects us all. I'm sorry.
For those of you watching around the country, that's DA Robert Sherman.
And I just want to say this real quick. One, I think you just can feel just from listening to DA Turner why it's important that he's in that office, right? But what you don't know, and what Mark referenced earlier, he mentioned this Warren Clinic that we did. A Warren Clinic is a program that we run at earlier, our organizers out here, I don't think he's still in. But basically, it's an amnesty program where people get their fines and fees waived. But it's not done like traditional amnesty programs where folks gotta come to the courthouse, right? It's a community-centered amnesty program. It takes place at a church or a community center. We have food, we got music. When we pulled up today, they was playing like Cupid Shuffle or something like that, right? So there's music, there's food, there's childcare for people who need to bring their children with them. It is a community-centered event where we waive fines and fees and people get their driver's licenses back. And we've been able to waive hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines and fees in the cities in the counties where we've been able to do this. Today was the second one in Selma. And so over those 2 days of doing them, we have impacted at least, and there may have been more, but at the point where we left today, it was 500 between those 2 days. 500 individuals that have had thousands of dollars of fines and fees waived, and they've been able to get their lives back, right? That event doesn't happen, so we organize it, but we can't do it, because at the end of the day, we can't waive the fines and fees. The DA can. And the judges can. And so the only way it works, the only way we are able to do this program is when we have DAs like Robert Turner that will help to make this event happen. And will waive those fines and let people get their lives back. And so again, I really want to give it up to him because he's the kind of DA that we need to deal with these issues in our community.
Thank you for that. We got some questions. We've given them on cards in the interest of time. I'm going to read some of the questions I've been given and get reactions from whomever in the panel is prepared to respond. Here's the first one. These are community questions, folks. Early engagement between the ages of 10 and 18 years of age. What are local leaders doing about this? Early engagement. Anybody want to respond?
So for the Selma Center for Nonviolence, we have a violence intervention program. We regularly visit our middle and high schools in order to teach our young people conflict resolution skills. there are skills that are associated with resolving conflict. And so we give them language. And we also do restorative circles. So teaching young people as well as teachers how to have healing conversations in response to various situations in life. DA Turner is very active in helping to facilitate opportunities in our community, along with Judge Perkins Walker. I just keep saying the same names because these are the people who are showing, right? I wish I could call more names. Amen. But they are the ones who are consistently showing up and making themselves known, expressing the fact and demonstrating love, not just talking about it, but demonstrating a love for the people who they were elected to serve. Churches, we're activating freedom spaces in local churches. As a matter of fact, our ground floor at the Selma Center is a model freedom space, and we're hoping to expand that out. We are growing what we call block clubs, which are not neighborhood watch, but they are neighborhood watch, right? So not criminalizing neighborhoods, but really watching, teaching folks how to go back to the basics and watch out for each other and rebuilding that network of care and consideration for our neighbors. So there are a lot of things that we're doing. I am grateful for where we are in Selma in this moment because I do see a lot of us within my generation reaching for the torch, if you will, from those who are older than those who currently have it. My challenge is for our elders to not just hold the torch and expect us to put our finger here and not have it really make a difference. What we have to do is share the torch so that it is easily transitioned to the next generation and we don't repeat the same mistakes that we're actually learning from the mistakes of the past and being able to implement, because the fight looks different. Yeah. Right? The fight is different now. You know, in the 60s, there was no social media. There were a lot of things that were in place that were destructive. And yet now the fight totally, not totally, but the fight definitely looks different. And making sure that as we are moving through the process of creating these networks that we're incorporating, like churches, the role of the church. We have over 200 churches in our city with 16,000 people. Churches should be a place of refuge, a place of love, a place where people can feel healed and whole. And so working with churches just to make sure that they were addressing the needs of our community holistically.
10:18, you want to follow that? Okay. Second question, why are there so many guns readily available in our community?
I think Brother Cook kind of mentioned this earlier around legislation. And so I think that's why it's so important that we are fully informed on who's representing us. As DA Turner mentioned, understanding in totality their role and being okay with being inconvenienced. That's a better word, right? Because I know sometimes we're like, man, we're doing all the things. I don't have time to make it to that town hall. I don't have time to go down to Montgomery, but we gotta make time, right? Because, essentially we're seeing how this is directly and indirectly impacting all of us. And so I think, having a heightened awareness of who our elected officials are, the legislation that's being created, how it's impacting us, and how we can play a role in helping shape that.
All right, thank you. And the last question is,
You want to answer, you want to find one question, I'm sorry.
No, I know we've been here a long time, but I think your answer pretty much answered it.
Yeah.
One of the things I can tell you on the street level is that on a lot of drug cases, a lot of cases where police officers take guns, what we're seeing increasingly is the girlfriend, the mom, the auntie, the uncles, can I get my gun back? So the federal law there has been a federal law passed and we're trying to get on the state level. There's a lot of people that are straw gun purchasers for people who aren't allowed to legally carry. And so what we're seeing are people who have purchased young ladies, honor roll students, nurses, teachers, who purchased 4 guns in a year, Dracos, stuff like that. But they're not buying them for themselves. They're buying them for the people who can't pick them up on their own. And when we trace those guns, we're seeing that there are more guns on the street because there are a lot of people in the community that are more complicit in the problems that we're facing than you would even realize. So there's a glorification of the gun culture through the music, through the movies. In America, to be faced, I mean, just face the facts. We are a violent country.
That's right.
Universally.
How we got here, right? Look at the inception of this country, right?
That's right.
That's who we have been. But I think we get a chance now to shift that, right?
Right.
Again, we talk about shit, we can just kind of tag team it here, but we talk about what it means to shift the atmosphere. That's the purpose of this. This isn't just about conversation. This is about everyone really leaving this room, right, with what they're to do.
Yeah.
So whether you write a note in your phone, whether you write it down on a piece of paper, like it's important for each and every one of us to find a way, so whether it's impacting the music, right, being mindful of what kids are listening to, whether it's, again, holding elected officials accountable, I think you're absolutely right. I just wanted to add that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, this is, an important conversation. Let me just say anecdotally, and I empathize with some, this is complex with some of the things Dee said. When Kamala Harris first ran for president in 2020, she came on my show and I asked her, what do you say to those who are concerned about violence and the disproportionate criminalization of our people? And she said, being a district attorney is a difficult thing because as much as you want to curb the criminalization, the locking up of our young people, there are family members who would come to her and say, what are you going to do about my child's and let's not forget, it's not just the gun violence. In many cities, I don't know if that's the case here, we don't, well, I shouldn't say we, but law enforcement, elected officials don't even care about crime in general when it comes to black folks. My car got stolen, hypothetically. So my house got broken into. So what? So there's this, either we are, and I got one more question. Either we are, y'all gave me a third question. Y'all got to be somewhere. Either we.
Listen, he said, we're gonna ask this last question.
Either we are dealing with overcriminalization, or we're dealing with nothing when it comes to justice. Because remember, there was another song that was popular, Public Enemy. 911 is a joke. And what was that about? All right, we are not. Here's the last question: How do we tie these organizations together and spread the ideas to slay all of these dragons? Anybody want to answer that question?
I'll take a small stab at it. So she mentioned that Health and Families Program. One of the functions in Alabama, the district attorney has a shall function. The shall function is that you shall enforce the truancy laws of the state of Alabama. We view that as an inroad to the system because we know the kids that are targeted at this school are the ones that are more than likely down the road end up getting into trouble. So we are also charged with handling juvenile court offenses. You can't get into the Health and Families Program if you have a criminal offense. But if you miss 3 unexcused days out of school, you get a letter from our office. So what has happened in Selma and in my entire circuit is all of these parents are getting letters from the DA. And so they're calling the DA and they're like, man, why are you sending me this letter? My kid go to school. But guess what we found out? A lot of the schools, the person that's responsible for putting the excused absences in at school, they weren't putting them in. So what that did is it sparked, the school system is now making sure that they're recording those excused absences on time. The kids that are definitely missing, we are intervening with, it's not called the Helping Children's Initiative, it's the Helping Families. We want to know why is he not coming? We had one situation where it was in the black in Selma now, if you're white, you're a minority. So we had a white lady with mixed kids who lived in the projects. she wanted her kids to go to school, not in the city school, but in the county school. So what happens is her car broke down. So she was not able to get the kids to the bus stop in the county to get them to go to school out of district. So we found out that the reason the kids were missing school is because his mama's car just had broke down. And so we were able to get her transportation so that her kids could get back to school, and that helped her tremendously. And her children have not missed a day out of school once the problem was identified. So it's community, it's the court system working with the school, letting them know we're not trying to take it over, but we want to help you keep the kids out there in the school and not in the street. Because when they're in the street, it's a problem. You know, we've had some 14-year-olds charged with murder in the last calendar year and two 15-year-old victims. That's heartbreaking. And so what happens when you talk about Kamala, this is what I wanted to jump in on. African Americans caused Kamala to be the first candidate to drop out of the first race when Biden won. Because we said, as a prosecutor, she's locking all our people up. But then, when Biden chose her to be the side piece, or the vice president, we rallied around her. She wasn't good enough to be number one, but we thought she was good enough to be number two. We have to change that narrative. And when she ran this time, we got behind her, but we did so much damage. And that's the same damage that we as communities do to DAs and to law enforcement officers. So it's a holistic approach. It's intergovernmental. And we have to understand that some jobs are just hard, and you got to make hard decisions.
All right, I've been given the hook. Now, there's one last thing. Quick, now I'm talking this in the hallway. I'll make this quick. There's a great clinician. He's gone. That's it. But Professor Amos Wilson. You all want to write this down. This is homework assignment. Amos Wilson. Amen. Now, he wrote a book entitled Black on Black Violence, not because he believes that's an adequate or appropriate term, it's actually a vulgar term. We don't refer to him group that way. Every group commits violence amongst its own community. We don't want to have a name. He named the book this to refute it. Title of the book, please, everyone get this book. Please type it in your phone, it's very important. I frankly think we should be giving these to law enforcement officials, giving it to DAs. It's a defibrillator in this conversation. We had a consent decree where I was for 5 years allowed to teach diversity awareness and sensitivity training in the Metropolitan Washington, D.C. Police Academy. And I said, this is going to be my textbook. They said no. And I made it my textbook anyway. The book is Black on Black Violence. The subtitle, Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination. Black on Black Violence, the Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation in Service of White Domination by Amos N. Wilson. And the first section is titled this, just so you get a sense of what this is about. The socio-political necessity of Black criminality. The socio-political necessity of Black criminality. This is created in this environment. One more time, Black on Black Violence. If you look up Black on Black Violence by Amos Wilson, you will find it. Please get that book, please read it, please share it. It is very, very important. It is a wake-up call. Most of you will read and say, you know what, that's right. I thought about that. That strikes a chord with me. All right, good people. This has been an outstanding gathering, has it not? We've had some serious conversation. Again, so proud of these very gifted young people. Let's hear it for Lydia Chapman, Director of Corporate Affairs and Selma Nonviolence. Deanna Reed, Alabama State Manager for Black Voters Matter, James Field of Forest, Miles College, SGA President, and the other two Gen-Z panelists, Cliff Albright, the co-found Black Voters Matter, and this Gen-Z moderator, I am Reverend Mark Thompson. God bless you all. Check the schedule. foot soldiers breakfast at 7:30 at Selma High School. Just so anybody doesn't know, a lot of people walk around foot soldier shirts, but really, a foot soldier was someone who was there on the bridge on Bloody Sunday 60 years ago today. So please go and see the foot soldiers, hear their stories, touch the hems of their garment, and shake their hands, okay? God bless you all. Thank you very much.